G'day, I'm Ian Swain, the owner of Swain Destinations, a company that customizes travel experiences to Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific Islands, Africa, Asia, India, and Mexico. And welcome to another edition of G'day with Ian Swain. Today, I'm truly excited to welcome my guest, who is a wildlife veterinarian from my homeland, Australia. She's interested in better understanding the impact of health on the conservation of threatened species and the health and welfare implications of wildlife translocations, both to the translocated individuals and to the broader ecosystem that they've been transplanted to. Having spent her career developing skills, experience and education in this area, Leanne currently is the Senior Veterinarian at the Australian Wildlife Health Centre at Healesville Sanctuary, part of Zoos Victoria. In this role, she is the clinical and research lead for the veterinary department at Healesville Sanctuary, ensuring the management and biosecurity and preventative health, the health and welfare concerns of the sanctuary's resident animals, conservation breeding programs of threatened species, and the sick and injured wildlife to present to the wildlife rescue. So you think you've had a busy day. I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Leanne Wicker today. So g'day, Leanne.
Hi.
Leanne, before we talk about the Aussie animals, which I love dearly, I know you traveled to Vietnam for research, and one of the animals you researched is one that I'm very intrigued with and have searched for in the Kalahari Desert, but never seen, and of course it's the pangolin. Can you share your story on those incredible animals and your time with them in Vietnam?
Yeah, they really are an incredible animal. They're really curious little creatures, quite I would probably say like a sweet personality. They're really interested. They'll come over and they'll sniff you, and they'll climb up your leg as well, thinking that you're a treat, I think. And their only defense, is to curl up into a little ball. So they are, curl up into a little ball. They don't do anything, aggressive at all. So they're really lovely. I'm not surprised you didn't see one. There's not very many people who've been lucky enough to see them in the wild. I have never seen one in the wild either. I was working in Vietnam in a wildlife rescue centre. We were looking after animals that were confiscated from illegal wildlife trade. And we heard about the increasing trade in pangolins throughout that region. And there was no one really working on that species. There was just very little known about them. And we set up the first pangolin rescue centre in Southeast Asia that was dedicated to pangolins. It was really hard to begin with because, like I said, not very much was known about them, and they really kind of had this reputation of being really hard to keep alive in captivity. They didn't do very well. I think that's partially because they're fussy little guys. They eat ants and termites, but different species will eat different, termites or ants, depending on whether they normally live on the ground or they normally live in trees. But we've done really well over the years, and I still work quite closely with the team over there, and we now have a really successful rescue centre rehabilitating pangolins and releasing them back into the wild, which is wonderful.
I love to hear that, and I'm happy that you said that it's not unusual for me not to see one, because I felt I missed out there for a while, but I will certainly try again. But now back to Oz. Tell us about your role. Tell about your role at Zoos Victoria. I know I mentioned it briefly in the intro, but it's a little more involved in that. Just let me know what you do there.
So I'm the Senior Veterinarian in the Australian Wildlife Health Centre, which is a sort of fancy name for our vet hospital here at Healesville Sanctuary. Our sanctuary only has Australian wildlife. So, it's a zoo that people can come and see, but it's only Australian native animals, which is really wonderful, really lovely to be in this beautiful area surrounded by nature and being able to share our wildlife with people. Our vet hospital is open to the public. So if you come to Healesville Sanctuary, you can walk in and walk around and watch our staff as we work. We look after animals here in our care. So we have animals that live here at the sanctuary, and obviously we make sure our vet team is, looking after them, making sure they're nice and healthy. We also have a range of conservation programs for some threatened species here in Australia. We have breeding programs here at the sanctuary for Tasmanian devils and mountain pygmy possums, some threatened frog species, birds, the little tiny mountain pygmy possums and leadbeater's possums. So it's a really, really fascinating, and our vet team helps to make sure that they're healthy and that we're, being able to contribute to the wild populations successfully. And then I think a really unique part of our work here is that we run a really busy rescue hospital for wildlife that is presented to us sick or injured from maybe members of the public or other vets or rangers, or other people might find animals that might be sick or injured, and they bring them in to us. We look after some of them here until release, or we work with wildlife carers. So there's sort of three different components of our work. It's all surrounded or all related to Australian native species. So we've got some incredible species here in Australia, and it's wonderful to be involved in their conservation and sharing that with our visitors. So yeah, as the senior vet here, I guess I take the lead in our research and our clinical approach, and work with a really wonderful team. It's a wonderful job. I love it.
It's got to be so fulfilling for you, because it's here helping animals that can't help themselves is just an incredible feeling for everybody, I think. And I know my daughter's doing a vet tech course, and she's just getting the great fulfillment out of that, seeing how she can help animals and how you all do it so well. This year, of course, began with the horrific bushfires in the summer in Australia, which the whole world knew about. And I know that your team was very much involved in the helping of the koalas that were potentially injured or potentially going to be injured by the bushfires. How did your team help, and what was the outcome of it all?
Yeah, goodness, it was a bit of a shocking start to 2020, wasn't it? Watching the maps, we all have apps on our phone now, and the fire maps, and seeing how it was just spreading all the way up the east coast of Australia. It was almost apocalyptic at times. Our Zoos Victoria is a partner with our government Department of Environment here in Victoria. And so when there's an emergency that involves wildlife, we provide the veterinary assistance and veterinary care to the department. And so as we watch that fire front sort of extend throughout some incredibly biodiverse areas of Victoria, we worked with our government Department of Environment to establish triage units. So they're a little bit like, I guess, advanced field hospitals. They're closer to the fire, so animals don't need to move very far. And we were able to see a whole range of animals. I think, the world saw a lot about koalas this year, but any animal that was injured or affected by the fires could be, brought in by the government officers or the firefighters, or those people who were there in the fire fields. So we saw, anywhere from little microbats or tiny little feather-tailed gliders. There were quite a few of those animals that live in trees that were affected by smoke inhalation, or they might have been dehydrated. The fires this year were so hot. I think even the trees that weren't burnt, often they were quite, the leaves were dry, so lots of animals were dehydrated as well. So we were able to see those animals in our triage units, where our vets, nurses, and actually we also provided keepers, because we ended up with quite a large number of different species in these sort of temporary, hospitals. So it was quite a lot of work to look after them. And so we had these teams of people, and we would assess the animals and, decide whether they were going to be okay and what level of care they might need. We were actually able to treat quite a large number of them. I think it was 42% of the animals that presented to triage were able to be released from those triage units after maybe they were rehydrated, or we provided some sort of first aid intensive care, and then they were fine. We just had to find unburnt, safe areas to release them back to, as close as possible to where they were found. But we then brought 24 koalas back to our hospitals here, closer to Melbourne, safe, away from that fire front, where we have purpose-built hospitals here with, amazing facilities to really give those animals some of the intensive care they needed. And so, yeah, for the last 11 months, that's what we've been doing, looking after these animals here, giving them that intensive care that they really needed. Some of them were really badly injured with incredibly bad burns. Really just making sure their welfare was remaining good, and that they, that they were healthy. And then we spent the last couple of months in beautiful big pre-release enclosures where they were able to climb and regain their strength and vitality. And I think, from a mental health perspective, they needed to also just get over that period of intense stress that they suffered at the beginning of the year. So some of them were here at the sanctuary in that space, and we also partnered with Phillip Island Nature Park. So over the past few months, we've watched those animals climb trees, choose where they want to sit right up the top. They don't really like sitting down close to us, right at the top of the trees where they're up in the breeze, looking out, surveying the scene. And we've just been able to watch those koalas really just become more and more like the wild koalas that they truly are, until, just over the last couple of weeks, we've been able to release them back into the wild. So taking them home is an amazing experience.
Are they all released back now?
Yeah, so we were quite strict, we need to make sure that when we rehabilitate wildlife, that when we release them back to the wild, they're going to be able to thrive, that they'll be able to integrate back into their wild population, that they'll survive, that they'll live healthy, happy lives out there. And so I think, when you think about the vast area of fires this year, we were able to release 14 koalas back into the wild from that process. And so, it's easy to think it's not a huge number of animals. But I think what we've been able to learn from those animals, and what we're continuing to learn, because we're monitoring them now that they're back in the wild, we're seeing how they're going, we're monitoring them with radio and GPS, and we're monitoring their health and welfare back in the wild for the next couple of months. I think what we learn from those animals is going to have really big impacts on a really large number of animals well into the future. We've spent the year learning, and we'll continue to learn.
Leanne, as I understand it, Zoos Victoria received donations from around the world for your work to help the koalas, particularly during the bushfires, and also for their future response. You must have been so happy to see the global community get together like this. Were there any great letters that they sent you, or anything that really sticks in your mind of how helpful they've been?
Oh my goodness. None of this would have been possible without that support from all over the world. Obviously here in Australia, we got a huge amount of support, but there was a global response to this. I think, those images that must have gone out around the world, touched so many people. And I think when people saw that we were really, trying to help, as many animals as possible, and we had these animals in our care, it's been this ongoing, outpouring of support. And what I think has been amazing is, obviously some people are able to donate a large amount of money, but not everyone can. And we had, schools who set up lemonade stands and, sold, crafted things, and some incredible donations from around the world, actually. And I think I just love it when you get those letters from kids and they've seen like an animal, and you get this picture that they've drawn, and it's never a massive amount of money, but oh my goodness, it's a massive amount of sort of emotional support, and it's wonderful, isn't it, to see?
Makes it feel like everything's what you're doing is worthwhile. Speaking of children, the next generation, do you see the next generation getting involved in volunteering to help Aussie animals, particularly over the last year? Is it starting to happen?
Yeah, look, I think social media, it's a good and a bad thing. And it certainly, takes stories into everybody's, living room. And I really think, I don't know whether it is social media or just the global nature of our world, but my feeling is that there's this increasing understanding of, the importance of biodiversity, and the importance of maintaining that biodiversity to have a sustainable future for all of us. And I think that children today are so much more aware of the importance of nature, perhaps, than maybe we were, or generations past. And, we have a real responsibility to make sure that we look after the planet for them as they grow up. But yeah, look, gosh, it's hard, isn't it, volunteering, when kids, want to be able to volunteer. It's hard. You want to make sure that when people are volunteering, that they're doing things that are safe, that are effective and meaningful. And so, I think we have at the zoo, we have a really great youth program where young, like they're teenagers often, kids, youth at the zoos, and they're often incredibly passionate kids, and they come and they do some great volunteering in our zoos, or tree planting, or all sorts of things to help us, support biodiversity. And then younger kids, I think it's about making sure that they learn, that they understand, that they love it, getting kids out into nature, taking their shoes off,
Yeah.
going for bushwalks.
No, it's great. And it's very, again, I keep on saying the word fulfilling, but anything to do with animals can be so fulfilling. But seeing the kids get involved now is great, and they understand it. But as you said, you've got to keep it safe enough so they don't hurt themselves or the animals as well at the same time, with not deliberately, obviously.
Yeah,
Listen,
and we're moving away from that space where, historically people would, we know that for people to protect and love something, they need to understand it, and they often need to feel some kind of connection. And I think, increasingly we understand that doesn't mean you need to necessarily hold an animal, but, learn about it, see it in its natural environment. There's lots of different ways we can connect. And I think making sure that children connect in a meaningful way is really important.
Leanne, thank you for your time today. It's truly thrilling to meet you. I was looking forward to this interview for quite a while to talk about it, because animals are I'm very caring of animals. But the thing is, I'm so proud of you as an Australian looking after the Aussie animals like you do, and setting the standards for the world to follow. So I really appreciate your time, appreciate what you do. And I know our clients love coming down to Healesville Sanctuary, and they come down and see all the good work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. Make sure they come and visit us here in the Australian Wildlife Health Centre when they come to the sanctuary. We love sharing our work.
I will do that for sure. We'll put it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Been a long time leading up to this point, but today we've been able to bring koalas that were really affected by the fires earlier this year back home to Malakuta, and here they are in the bush in the rain. They don't care. Seeing them get out of those boxes and go up the tree like Leafy, most koalas, when they are climbing up trees, they stop low to the ground and survey the scene. I love it that Leafy was just like straight up. I'm just going to show you how healthy I am. Releasing Vicky and Leafy back to the wild, when we flew out of Malakuta, and there was this awful night before. It's really stressful, putting animals on, in that kind of transport, knowing that it was a really long way back to the sanctuary. And I remember sort of saying to them as we were putting them in, guys, I know this is a big day for you, but I can't wait. We'll get you back. I promise we'll get you back. And here we are, and they're both in trees around me, and it's pretty amazing actually. They both were really badly burnt, and there was a whole team effort to get them here, and so much love, so much knowledge, experience, and the whole of our organisation, Zoos Victoria, Philippi, so many different people working together, and now here they are back. Out of that devastating time in January. It's really lovely, isn't it, to bring life back to Malakuta. When they came back, when we took them from this triage unit and back to get that veterinary care, we said, if we're going to bring them back, we have to do it really well, and we have to learn from them, how do they go? What's their health and welfare post-release? So that, it's not just about these animals, but we can learn, and this will have an impact on, the way we rehabilitate, the way we return animals to the wild in the future. There was people all over the world watching what was happening here in Australia. I think bringing animals back to the wild like this is a message of hope